All righty. Well, it looks like it's the 2 o'clock hour, and we like to start on time so you all can get to your next commitment. So, thank you again for being here this afternoon for Campus Speaks. I think it's our fifth summer showcase. For those of you that are returning, we love having you here again to get to connect with our speakers and see a little bit of what they might be like if they were on your campus. And if not, we hope that you gather some great takeaways, enjoy your time, and leave feeling excited and inspired about what you've experienced. We have three speakers this afternoon: Stephanie Simpson, Jada Samuel, and Tricia Downing. We are very, very excited for each of them to share a little bit of their keynote, and Stephanie Simpson's going to get us kicked off today. Stephanie Simpson equips individuals with tools to become their own leaders, build robust resilience, and perform at their best even when the stakes are high. Her methods blend captivating storytelling with research-backed peak performance strategies, enabling attendees to have a deeper self-awareness and richer connection with both themselves and the world around them. Please welcome Stephanie Simpson.
Thank you. Excited to be here with everybody. I'm going to start off with a question for you to think about. What would be the book title of your life right now? This was a question that I posed to my stress management students this summer at John Jay College of Criminal Justice during our summer class when I started off one of our discussions around transition, because I kept thinking about my life in different transitions that I was going through. And one of the agreements I have with my students is that when I ask them a question, I will also answer that question. So when they said to me, well, Miss Simpson, what's your answer for that? I thought about it and I was like, well, there's kind of a theme that's been going on recently, but actually, if I'm being honest, over the last 5 years, and the book that kept coming to mind to me was The Very Hungry Caterpillar. So hopefully some of you know what book that is. It's a children's book, and it's about a caterpillar that munches his way through everything in sight and just keeps eating and eating and eating, and then gets really big. And then one day he builds himself a cocoon and he transforms into a butterfly. And now, because this is a children's book, there is a part of this transformation story, because that's what it is, that the book skips over. And honestly, I've noticed that most transformation stories skip over this same part as well. And what they don't actually talk about in this is what's happening inside of that cocoon. I do want to pause here because I'm a big person into butterflies and I research them a lot. And caterpillars actually make chrysalises to turn into butterflies. The caterpillars that turn into moths are the ones that use cocoons. So I just thought that was a fun little tidbit. But anyway, let's get back to this chrysalis, because what actually happens in that chrysalis is super important. The caterpillar doesn't just automatically grow wings. It actually completely dissolves, loses all form. Its body liquefies, its structure completely breaks down, and it becomes goo, like literal goo. And then, only then, when it becomes completely unrecognizable, does it then start to build its wings and then transform into a butterfly. So that middle part, that goo stage, is what no one really talks about when we talk about change and transition and transformation and growth. And that's what I want to focus on today, because how we navigate that goo stage with intention and with awareness is really important. Because let's be honest, right now, I think we're all navigating a lot of change, so much change coming at a rapid pace, and therefore many transitions. Sometimes they're big, sometimes they're more subtle or small. Maybe you've just graduated and you're wondering what's coming next. Maybe you're starting your academic journey in college. Maybe you're doing something new in your career, or maybe there's a part of you that just feels like you need to let go and grow and expand. Or maybe you were like me a few years ago, when I felt like I was standing on the edge of something that was just calling me forward, but I didn't quite know what it was, and I didn't know what it would look like, and if I was even ready for it. And what I'm referring to is a few years ago, I decided to leave what was, for all, on paper, a successful career and life. Something I worked really hard for, building a career in higher education, in the performing arts world, and in the coaching and peak performance world. But I decided to leave that because I felt this pull to go out on my own and take what was a side hustle at that point and expand it into a full-time coaching, consulting, and speaking business. I thought that I was prepared. I had a plan. I had my credentials. I had a lot of passion. I still have a lot of passion. And I thought that's all I need, right? I also had no idea how hard it would be to let go of some of the identities that I had worked so hard to build and what it would be like to grieve those. I knew that there would be some sort of transition period, but I didn't expect how much it would be and how much it would take out of me. Things like grieving the job title itself or the routine that I had, the predictability, the community that I had built, and also a version of me that I worked really hard to become. I didn't realize that there would be many times that I would be questioning every decision I made, that I would be in my apartment crying and having a really hard time seeing the vision and being really clear about it and what was I working towards. It just felt like all the structure around me was dissolving and falling apart. And I remember calling a friend and telling them, I literally feel like I'm a puddle of a person because I was in the goo stage. And that's when I realized that transitions aren't just about the external changes around us, they're also about those internal unravelings. And any meaningful transition, whether it's personal or professional, asks us to dissolve who we were in order to actually make space for who we're becoming. And just like the caterpillar, that can be really scary because we don't actually have proof that there's a butterfly at the end of this transformation. You just know that there's something in you that doesn't quite fit anymore. There's this nudge or you feeling this shift. And sometimes actually the change is happening to you. What I'm seeing right now in my work is a lot of company reorganizations, or when I'm working with students, them moving into a new part of their life, their career, finishing college or starting college. And you find yourself sitting in that space in between. And it's that in-between space, that goo stage that I like to call it that, is what I have become to believe as the real work of leadership, both the self-leadership and the leadership of others. Not the performance of what we think leadership should look like, being confident all the time or feeling like we need to have all the answers and get it right, but learning how to lead yourself and others when you don't know what the next thing is. Learning how to stay present while all the old parts and the structures and the systems are dissolving. And learning how to soften into what's real instead of rushing towards what's right in front of you or what might feel safe. The caterpillar, when he's doing this, he's brave. He doesn't know that he's becoming a butterfly. He just knows that he needs to let go and he needs to leave this land-bound life in order to expand in the hope of something more, something bigger. And that takes courage to actually act on that feeling. But the caterpillar also doesn't just, dissolve on the sidewalk either. It builds itself a chrysalis, that container, that space designed to protect it, to hold it, and support it while everything is breaking down so that it can build itself back up. And I realized that's what I needed to do for myself. When I was that puddle in my apartment on my couch, just feeling like everything inside me was unsteady, I had to build something outside of me that was steady and could hold me. So some of the things I decided to do was, one, create a routine to anchor myself, having those routines every day, practicing breath work so that I could regulate my nervous system, reaching out for help, talking to mentors, to coaches, to my friends and family, to have them remind me of my why. And then learning to be kind to myself and compassionate to myself, especially when I didn't feel like I was doing it right. So we all need to build our own versions of a chrysalis. And in the work I do now, coaching leaders, working with students and faculty and staff, what I've learned again and again is that the people who grow the most aren't the ones actually with the clearest path. They're the ones with the strongest containers, that support, that structure, and the self-awareness, so that they can fully dissolve and rebuild. And that's the inner game of leadership. So let's talk a little more of what's actually happening when you're in that goo state, right? What's happening to our nervous system when we're in the middle of transition and transformation? Because here's the thing. Whether we realize it or not, change and transition trigger our stress cycle. And our nervous system doesn't differentiate between real danger and uncertainty. To our brain, you stepping into the unknown, whether that's changing jobs, graduating, starting a new chapter in life, feels the same as being chased down the street by a bear. And what do? We end up freezing, we fawn, we overwork, we avoid things. We try to plan and control our way out of the discomfort instead of staying in the present with it. Being an effective leader, it starts with understanding yourself in a deeper way so that you can then interact with others in the world around you in more meaningful ways. And a tool that has totally changed my life that I also use with all of my clients is a tool called the Energy Leadership Framework. And I want to be clear, it's not something I created. It's something I'm trained in from the International Institute of Professional Excellence and Coaching, which is an ICF certified training program. And this framework is based on the idea that we move through these 7 different levels of awareness, and how we engage these levels changes when we're in our stress cycle. So you can think of these levels as 7 different lenses, almost like different types of glasses. And each lens has a core thought, a core emotion, and a core action and behavior. So one of the examples I always give is I wear contacts or glasses. And when I'm not wearing either of them, everything around me feels really blurry and therefore kind of uncomfortable, right? I'm uneasy. If I'm in a new space and I can't see, that's really scary. And so it's going to change the way I think and the way I feel, and therefore the way I act and respond. As soon as I put those glasses on, everything becomes clearer, right? I feel more confident. I feel more safe or protected. It's going to change the way I think about things now, and I'm going to move through that space and that environment very differently. And so this framework helps us to understand how we're choosing to show up in situations, or how we are and what choice do we want to make to change the way we're showing up. And that every level serves a purpose, and a powerful one at that. So let's quickly go through each level so you can get a little taste of it. So at level 1, that bottom level, we feel really hopeless in this level. Like everything is happening to us. It's feeling really heavy. Like, why did I do this? Did I make a mistake? A lot of worry here. At level 2, we start getting into that fight place. We want to protect ourselves. We want to assure a win, and we start pushing through things. We're like, I just got to push through this, push through this, push through this, which inevitably will lead to burnout. Level 3, we start taking more responsibility for our own actions, our behaviors, our feelings. We start being able to see that maybe there's a silver lining here, and how can we focus on that light at the end of the tunnel? In level 4, we get to a place of concern and care for both ourselves and others. We are asking questions like, how can I serve? What does help look like? What help do I need? And then level 5, we get into our curiosity mindset, that growth mindset that Carol Dweck talks so much about. Thinking about, what am I learning from this? How can I take what I'm learning and bring it into my next step? And how can I collaborate with other people? Level 6, this is our level of creativity, of joy, of flow, and synergy. I feel this a lot when I'm dancing or creating with people, and honestly, when I'm speaking with people at different schools and different companies. There's that connection, that synergy with the people in the audience around me. Level 7, the highest level, I call this the Yoda level. This is unconditional love for ourselves and others. It's where we have a deep trust and understanding that everything is unfolding as it should. So we are all moving through these levels every day, whether we're really aware of them or not anyway. And the goal is to become more aware of how we're operating, especially when we're going through those transitions and that uncertainty and uncomfortable parts of things. Because when you're in those hard moments and you're doubting yourself, you're spiraling in the fear, you can pause and ask yourself, what energy am I bringing right now? What story am I telling myself? And what else might be true? I can tell you that asking myself those questions have gotten me out of so many level 1, 2, and 3, just cycling through those levels over and over again when I felt like I was a puddle and in that goo. And it allowed me to remind myself that I don't need to go back to those versions that felt safer. I do have what it takes to continue to expand. And when you can practice naming where you are emotionally without judging it, then you can start to shift it. You have more power and agency over it. And one of the biggest things that I've noticed with my research and working with leaders in all different industries and different ages is that it's not about always being the strongest or having that armor or being protected or knowing everything or being on all the time. Real leadership really starts with that inner game and being honest with yourself first, and being emotionally aware and intelligent. Because when you can name that, when you can name your stress and your stories with compassion instead of shaming it, that's your authentic power and your inner leader. And when you can do that in real time over and over again, it changes not only the way that you lead yourself, but the way you lead others. So before I wrap up, I want to share with you two different tools to think about. One is called Name It to Tame It. When you're feeling that stress, that overwhelm, literally pause and ask yourself and say, right now, I'm feeling blank. And that makes sense because of blank. That simple act of naming it distances yourself from the emotion and gives your brain the signal that you're safe enough. Then do that energy check-in. Think about, what level am I showing up? Is that level working for me or against me? And what would it look like if just a moment I took a new perspective? Because sometimes when you take that moment to do that new perspective, a whole new world opens for you. And when you do that consistently, you begin to evolve. You're just like that caterpillar. You don't lose yourself in the process, you gain more. What was once a land-bound creature is now can fly and see the world in different ways. So if you're finding yourself right now in that goo state, if you feel like you're dissolving and questioning, first of all, you're not broken. You're also not alone. You're just transforming. So ask yourself, what are you leaving behind? What's the chrysalis you need to build for yourself? And be proud of the fact that you're in the goo because it meant you were brave enough to grow. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. That was super insightful on personal transformation and how to kind of get ourselves through some of those bumps in the road, especially great going straight into a new academic year where we're all going to have a lot of changes that come forward. So thank you again. We're going to transition over to our next speaker, and that's Miss Jada Samuel. Hi, Jada. Jada Samuel is known as the Confidence Catalyst. She is a dynamic and empowering keynote speaker who inspires her audiences with her personal stories and practical advice. She focuses on confidence, sisterhood, self-awareness, and the power of mentorship. Please help me welcome Miss Jada Samuel.
All right. You're in college now. You're older. You've got things figured out, or at least you think you do. And you're sitting here. So that probably means that you're responsible and goal-oriented and driven and all the things, right? All of the things. You might even be maintaining an incredible GPA or be president of some organization or a few. And that 5-year plan, it is laid out. And the 10-year plan, oh, I just know it's set in stone. You tell yourself all the time, I've got this, because you've been working on your confidence and you do have this. But then something happens and you're reminded that you can't do this all on your own. Or maybe someone reminds you that you shouldn't do this all on your own. Now, of course, we all need family and friends. That's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? We all need love and we need belonging and we need community. Everyone's always talking about community. Well, in your community, you also need people that are going to guide you, that are going to challenge you, push you, check on you, and most importantly, share with you, share their journeys, their challenges and setbacks and struggles and obstacles, or maybe even their big wins, their big moments, the consistency, hard work, and dedication that it took for them to reach their level of success. What I'm trying to tell you is you need a mentor. If you're listening now, you probably have someone in mind that might be your mentor already. And if not, you might be the person that was like me in college, stressing about where the heck do you find all of these mentors? Everybody's telling you that you need a mentor to reach your goal, but where are they? Are they career mentors? Are they spiritual mentors? Are they peer mentors? And like, how do you find them? What do you say? Do you pay for their coffee? Do you let them pay because they probably have a lot more money than you? Do you send them a Zoom link or do you let them do that because maybe they even have like a personal assistant? Do you send them your resume and let them look over it? but this isn't a job interview. So, like, you're just trying to have a conversation. And honestly, it's all overwhelming. And the truth is, finding a mentor can be a complicated process, but it doesn't have to be. And just like any relationship, it takes work. Sometimes you start the process by just identifying what you need in a mentor. And sometimes you start with who you already know. Now, I have had the opportunity to speak to over 30,000 elementary school kids. And let me tell you, middle school and elementary school kids can be tough. But you know what they've reminded me time and time again? Is that people with similar experiences, or maybe really different experiences, can add value to our lives. We need diversity in terms of the people that are around us in our elementary school classrooms to learn from, but also in our mentors when we get older. So, no, just like I talk about in my children's book, Joy on a Journey, your mentors don't have to look like you. You can learn from people who have different lived experiences, have different perspectives and different voices on issues that might be a concern for you. Now, I've been really, really lucky to have savvy, connected women pour into me for years and years. But there's one woman who undoubtedly changed my life and my perspective on mentorship. Now, I'm going to tell you a quick story about this woman. I had the once in a lifetime opportunity to serve as Miss South Carolina. But before that, I had lost 4 times. Not once on TV in front of a small group of people. I'm talking years and years and years on TV in front of everybody, including all of the women at my grandma's church. And if you're from the South, you know the women at your grandma's church. That's a deep group. But I had a lot of people rooting for me too, including all of those women. One day at a workshop and an event, I was listening to a woman on a panel, and she was speaking about her experiences in leadership and the things that she had learned and how she'd coached Miss Chicago's, Miss Illinois, and she'd coached several Miss Americas. And I was like, this woman, the woman who is completely opposite of me, she's 70 years old. Well, 70 plus now, but don't tell her I said that. She's a white woman. I'm clearly not. She is from the Midwest. She could call Venus Williams or Sierra and Russell Wilson on speed dial, and she was extremely intimidating. I'm talking about like didn't smile, like doesn't do physical touch and side church hugs like we do down here in the South. But she was someone who had the audacity of a man who'd never been told no in his life. And I said, you know what? I want that. I see something in this woman that I can relate to for some odd reason. And I'm going to walk up and talk to her. From one conversation, Fran became a mentor of mine. She poured into me. She helped me to believe that even though we were opposites, that we still shared so many things in common, including our ability to make an impact in this world. She taught me that I could do things that I didn't even know were possible. She helped me to believe in myself and see myself in a completely different light. And honestly, without Fran, I wouldn't have become the fourth Black woman in the 102-year history of Miss America to represent my state, the oldest woman to serve as Miss South Carolina, and only the first woman in over 60 years to have an acting talent to represent my state and compete at Miss America. Now, if someone helping you to believe in yourself and become the absolute best version of yourself isn't worth reaching out to, stepping out of your comfort zone to say, I need you to be a mentor for me, then I don't know what is. Now, my question for you is, do you have someone in your life that you can ask your hard questions to, that you can get unfiltered advice from, that you can call to share your lows or maybe celebrate your highs? Once you find a mentor, you have to be intentional about maintaining that relationship and eventually creating your own moments and opportunities to pour into someone else. Mentorship is powerful, it's life changing, and oftentimes it's the key between good and great.
Thanks, Jada, for that. It's always good for us to be thinking about how do we cultivate new mentors in our life. So great little tidbits there. We're going to move on to our last speaker for today's showcase, and that is Tricia Downing. Hi, Tricia.
Hello.
After being hit by a car, Tricia Downing went from a competitive cyclist to a paraplegic, requiring a wheelchair for her mobility. Now she is a dynamic disability advocate who is passionate about building communities, creating a sense of belonging, and empowering organizations to include disability into the diversity conversation. Please help me welcome Tricia Downing.
Thanks, Monica. Have you ever had a moment when everything was going exactly to plan, and then in an instant, the plan disappeared? I've had that moment. But before I go there, let me take you back to a time when all I saw in front of me was possibility. So growing up, I dreamed of going to the Olympics because I was in awe of the athletes who were chasing the gold medals and they were standing tall on the podium with the American anthem playing in the background. It gave me goosebumps. And this athletic obsession of mine started when my mom took me to my very first swim lesson, which quickly turned into swim team and competition. And when I was in middle school, I was a gymnast and I spent the better part of my time upside down. In high school and college, I was on my school diving teams, and if I ever saw a diving board on it, I was immediately on it doing flips and twists. But even with all of these hours that I spent training, my Olympic dreams remained just that, dreams. So in my 20s, I shifted my focus and I pursued a master's degree in sports management. And I was lucky enough to land a job at the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs, Colorado. There I had the front row seats to the very greatness that had been captivating me years earlier. And so my first role was as the communications director for USA Table Tennis, which you might know as ping pong, but definitely don't say that to an elite player. And through that job, I was lucky enough to be the press officer for the 1996 Olympic table tennis team in Atlanta. That meant I wrote stories, I supported athletes, and I just soaked up the Olympic atmosphere, which was amazing. And by far, one of the greatest days happened one of the first days that I was in Georgia. It was a Friday night, and all of the press officers in all of our respective sports, we were finishing our work, and we were a little bit disappointed because we had hoped that we were going to go to the opening ceremonies that night, but we didn't have enough tickets for our entire crew. So it was like a all or nothing type thing. But unexpectedly, our director, Bob, blasted into the office with this incredible news. He had managed to get enough tickets for everyone to go. So you can only imagine the excitement that swept through the office of Olympic junkies that we were, because it was a total surprise and a last minute development. And we literally had to get up that very moment and run to the Olympic Stadium to get there in time. Unfortunately, there were so many of us that we couldn't sit together, but it was okay because the energy in the entire stadium was infectious and the parade of nations was inspiring. And there was this electric sense of pride in the air. So even though I wasn't on track to be an elite athlete, I still spent the evening dreaming about what it must feel like to be down on the field and representing your country. And that trip just sparked something in me. So when I got home, I decided I was going to take up a new sport. It was going to be cycling, which was one of the Olympic sports that had caught my imagination. And I bought a bike, I joined a team, and I was hooked. Over the next couple of years, I built my confidence, and I actually believed it was within my reach to climb to the professional level. So in 2000, I was a school teacher, and I was lucky enough to have the summer off. So I decided that even though I wasn't a pro cyclist yet, I could pretend to be one. And I packed up and I headed to races across the country from Wisconsin to Indiana. And I finished in a small town in Pennsylvania called Altoona. And while I was in Altoona, I was competing in the Tour de Tuna, a 6-day stage race of 325 miles. Now, it was a little smaller than that little bike race you might hear about in France every summer. But for me, it was no less exciting because I was lining up along with women who actually would be chasing their Olympic dreams later that summer in Sydney, Australia. And even though I was closer to the back of the pack in all the races than the front, I felt like one day I would race among them and be a true contender. When I got home, I doubled down. I trained harder. I set ambitious goals, and I built a plan to rise in the ranks. And then life threw me a curveball. It was September, and my friend Matt came to visit me in Colorado. And on his last day, I took him on a ride to Lookout Mountain, which was one of my usual training spots. And so we climbed this grueling hill, and at the top, we stopped at a restaurant, and I grabbed our bottles off the bikes, and I headed in to get them refilled. And while I was standing at the bar, there was a television set that was above the bar, like there normally is. And at this point, the Sydney 2000 Olympic Games had started. And so not only were they being broadcast in that very moment, but they were actually showing the cycling events, which doesn't happen very often. And I took it as a sign that I was going to make it. I practically skipped out to tell Matt. We hurried back on our bikes to head down the mountain, and it was a great descent. It was fast, it was technical, it was exhilarating, and we rode into town, and I was riding behind Matt, and I got lost in my daydreams, and I was thinking about the time when I was going to win one of those big races, beating all of those fast girls, and I'd stand on the podium with this heavy gold medal around my neck. And then I looked up and I saw Matt crossing a street called Crabapple, and I saw him have to swerve around a car to avoid being hit. And I thought, surely that driver saw that they almost hit a cyclist. And then I realized the driver didn't see anything at all. So I went for my brakes, and I didn't get to them quickly enough. And the front wheel of my bike hit the front bumper of the car. I was launched into midair, landing on my back on the windshield and falling to the ground. And as I lay there, my body felt disconnected. I could feel the warm pavement under my shoulders, but I couldn't feel anything under my legs. I tried to get my knees to bend, my quads to tighten, my ankles to roll. The date was September 17th, 2000. And right there, the athletic dreams that I'd spent a lifetime chasing vanished in the blink of an eye. I was instantly paralyzed and would never walk again. Fortunately, that moment wasn't the end of my story, but it was definitely the beginning of a new chapter. And what I didn't know then was that I was about to enter something that I now call the cycle of hope, which is about resilience. It's a way to dig out from the dark holes that you find yourself in when life doesn't go to plan. It's not a shortcut. It's not a perfect formula. But for me, it's been a real and repeatable process that I've lived through, and I continue to live through every time I face adversity. So the cycle of hope is a model that I created, and it has 5 stages. So the first stage is suffering. And that's the moment when everything changes and nothing makes sense. It's the disorientation, the pain, and the grief when life throws you off course. Second is endurance. And this is where you have to keep going even before you have all the answers. It's about being persistent and consistent and staying on the course even when things are hard. Then next comes strength. And that is about not doing it all on your own. It's asking for help and accepting support when you need it. Then we move on to character. And this is how you respond when things go sideways. So it's things like your mindset, your self-talk, and your internal decision-making. And finally is hope. And this is the choice to believe in something better and that the courage have the courage to pursue it, even when the outcome isn't guaranteed. So today I'm going to walk you through part of this cycle to demonstrate how it can help you navigate your challenges and develop your resilience, because I see resilience as a muscle. The more you exercise it, the more you'll be able to handle the challenges that come your way. So since we have limited time, I'm going to focus on strength because It's a stage I think people don't understand often. And it's about not toughing it out alone. It's about believing I'm strong, not because I'm only strong within my person, but because of the support of my village. And so after my injury, the nurses at the rehab hospital told me they'd never seen anyone get as many cards or visits or surprise packages I did. And honestly, I didn't think that happened by accident because I've always been somebody who leaned into connection with other people. So long before texting and DMs, I found a way to stay close to the people I'd met, whether it was writing letters or staying in touch or just not hesitating to show up when somebody needed me. And back then, I didn't call it building my network. I just knew that to me, other people mattered. And so in that toughest moment of my life, that investment came back to me and it held me up. Because the truth is, strength isn't just about pushing through the obstacles, it's about letting people in. And in those early weeks, I needed help with so many things, from getting around in my wheelchair to learning new skills to simply just needing somebody to make me laugh. And as someone who prides myself on being capable and independent, that was a really hard lesson to learn. But leaning on other people, it didn't make me weaker, it made me stronger. And it gave me the space to heal that I needed. It gave me the courage to keep trying, and this reminder that I wasn't doing this all alone. So I started to look at the people around me like a team, like a sports team, and everyone had a role. So the first people that I looked for were mentors. And these were people who could help me see what was still possible. And maybe they had experienced some similar situations and come out the other side fairly unscathed. And then I had my coaches who pushed me to grow and to work hard even when I wanted to give up, helping me with the day-to-day challenges that I experienced of the change in my body and the change in my life. And then I had cheerleaders who reminded me to celebrate the small wins and the big ones. And I like to say that they believe in me more than I believed in myself. And then finally, I had my challengers. And these were the people who called me out when I got stuck in this negative self-pity kind of place. And they kept me honest and moving forward. And so I see them as the people who are slightly ahead of you, maybe who you're trying to catch up with, and they're pushing you to be better. And so that was my village, my crew. And I'll tell you something important. You can't wait until life falls apart to build that crew. You have to start now. And you start by showing up for your people and checking in with them and being real. Because when it's your turn to need somebody, that foundation will be there. So I want to ask you this. Do you know who's in your corner? Take a minute to think about it. Who could be a mentor? Who's your coach? Who are your cheerleaders? And do you have a challenger? I think you should make sure you have at least one person in each of these categories, because those people, they're your starting lineup. But there's one more thing that I think you should take into consideration, and that's, whose corner are you in? Because it's one thing to have a support system, and it's another to be somebody else's support, because strength multiplies when we share it, whether it's sending an encouraging text or showing up when a friend's world is falling apart. You can also be the reason that somebody else stays in the race. And that's the power of connection. And that, to me, is what real strength looks like. Because when you learn to let others in, to lean on, to learn from, you stop trying to muscle through everything by yourself. The journey of the cycle of hope is continuous. Even with your village, you still have to show up every single day for yourself and choosing your own mindset. So after my injury, I had to keep remembering to roll forward. I leveraged my passion for sports to help me heal, and the lessons I learned as an athlete gave me the strength to move forward. And that's what I'm sharing with you now. So looking back, I think of that young 20-something who was sitting there watching the Olympic Games opening ceremonies, dreaming of what it would be like to march with Team USA. And if I could talk to her now, I'd tell her, keep dreaming. You never know how life will unfold. Because on September 7th, 2016, I did march into a stadium to thunderous applause as a member of Team USA at the Rio Paralympic Games. It definitely didn't look anything like the dream I had all those years ago, but the dream came true nonetheless. And in that moment, I realized something powerful. There's always more than one way to achieve a goal. Sometimes the detour isn't the end, it's simply the redirection that leads you to something better. So, as you're continuing your own journey, whether you're chasing a dream, facing a challenge, or figuring out who you are, I want to leave you with the core lesson of the cycle of hope. First, suffering is real, but it doesn't have to get the final word. You can acknowledge the pain without giving up your power. Secondly, endurance means keeping your eye on your why. You will find the strength to keep going even when the path feels unclear to you. And then strength, it's built with others. So find your crew, the people who will push and pull and cheer for you, and let them in. Then comes character, which is focusing on what you can control, your mindset, your attitude, and your next choice. And finally, hope is the courage to believe in what's still possible, to stay open, to stay curious, and above all, always believe you can. Thank you.
Thank you, Tricia. That was great. Thanks for sharing your personal story and a little bit of insight on the cycle of hope. So I'm going to invite back Stephanie and Jada as well. And David Stillman's going to just lead us through a few Q&A that might have come in, but I'll turn it over to David.
Fantastic. Thank you, all three of you, for some great insight. Wonderful nugget of truth. I'm going to work backwards, and I'll start with Tricia, which, if you don't know, there's something extra special about her as well. Like me, a Maryland Terrapin. So, there's that extra that's just, one more wonderful thing. One of the things I love that I saw somebody in the comments put that in there, that strength multiplies when shared. I love that. And I think conceptually that feels really good. I think it's probably very scary at first when you realize you're leaning on others' strengths more than you're used to. And I bet that transition of what you're used to what you need, that's a bridge that's not easy to navigate. So I'm sure that as you have a full hour, you're able to get more into the weeds of things. But I think that was something that, because it is such a great idea that strength is shared, and the idea of giving and receiving, and that cycle is powerful. But how do you to start to navigate your own, I guess, the insecurity and the fear when you do need to lean on other strengths a little more than you're used to in specific areas? Is there a mindset frame? How would you suggest someone considers starting to navigate that mentally?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of letting go of your ego and letting down your walls. And that was definitely something that I had to do, because I was I can do everything myself kind of person. But what this injury showed me and told me is that we can't always do things by ourselves. Some things happen that are out of our control, and we have to lean on other people for support. And so I think it's really important to just realize that that's okay, because it's going to turn around one day and somebody else is going to need to lean on you for support. And I found that, after I got out of the hospital, after I became an athlete again, and I'd been using a wheelchair for, 10 years, I had other people who were contacting me and saying, well, how do you do this? How do you do this? How do you get around? How do you, get back mentally to a place where you're feeling confident and independent? And so I think it always comes out full circle. And that's why I really like the cycle of hope model, because we're not just in this suffering place one time and then we get around the circle to hope. It's a continual cycle. And it, might not be, the next part that's difficult might not be for a couple years down the road, but it's coming. But also the hope is coming around too.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. That's fantastic. Jada, a very different direction. I had curious with you, because personally, I know I've had mentors that have been super helpful, and I've tried also to be a helpful mentor. I'm sure we have all tried in different ways, but at some point, sometimes it doesn't click. And so, how do you identify that you're not getting what you need from that mentorship relationship, and then maybe even how do you break up with a mentor? How do you kind of say, hey, thank you for your feedback, but kind of move on to find something. It's just like any other relationship, when it's not mutually serving. How do you approach that? Because it seems, especially not just because of the power differential, but you as a mentee asking for their time. How do you navigate that well so you're not burning a bridge, but finding a mentor that really is serving you?
Well, I think you said it best. It's just like any other relationship that you have. Of course, it's difficult to break up with someone that you might be in a relationship or having a friendship breakup. I know as a girl's girl, that's the worst thing ever. Like the boys, yeah, but as a girl's girl, that's the worst. So, breaking up with a mentor, just recognizing that you might not be gelling or you might not be getting what you need out of the relationship, comes from one, recognizing what you do need in that moment. What you need as a high school student might not be the same thing that you need as an early college student versus someone who's ready to transition into a full-time career. Early career, you might be a completely different person than you are 5 years down the road, mid-level career. So just recognizing that your needs are changing in the same way that we evolve in friendships and other relationships, knowing that you can just take a step back and say, okay, this is what I need now, and this is not what I'm getting. But saying that out loud first and figuring out how to navigate that conversation is definitely not easy, but it's something that I'm sure, because your mentors are probably people that are a tad bit more successful than you. That's the whole point of the relationship. They don't have a lot of time to waste. So you meeting up with them for coffee to not get anything out of it, or you taking time to do a 1 hour Zoom check-in with them and not gaining anything from it, it's wasting their time and it's wasting your time. So being upfront about what you need and being clear, writing that out sometimes helps. Sending a message about these are the things that I want to talk about during this hour, that helps sometimes reframe that conversation as well, so that you're not just chit chatting and wasting time. And if it's not working, in the same way that you would break up with anybody else, you got to have a conversation about just letting it go and transitioning into something that does work for you. And maybe even asking them if they know someone that could be a better fit.
That's a great idea. So what I'm hearing is don't break up with them in a text. Don't
No.
don't send them a text message. Be like,
And we don't ghost. In
deuces.
any
Bye.
relationship, we
Don't
don't
do that. Okay.
ghost.
Okay. And yes, we don't ghost. We actually don't send an emoji of a ghost even. We just okay. All right. I appreciate that. Very cool. Excuse me. Stephanie, one thing I wanted to ask you about the chrysalis is it's an interesting concept, the idea that it holds the goo, like a cup, like a little chalice of something. How do you create a chrysalis with a good mirror? Because I think one of the things that you're talking about is that it's that group of people that protect you. But if they're really going to protect you, they're also going to be honest with you in the best possible way, which means giving you an accurate mirror of where you are, and maybe if you're kind of needing a little push to get toward where you're going, that mirror can show you where you are relative to where you could be or where you were. But it also sounds like a special group of people that are able to both be really supportive and give you that good mirror. So are there strategies or tips that you would have in being able to build that wonderful, comfortable, chrysalis for all your goo that also has a good mirror that is helpful?
Yeah, I really appreciate that question, because if the whole point of having that container that's helping you to grow, in order to grow, we can't just be staying in our same stories, stuck in all of that, and having a mirror that's reflecting that back, or noticing patterns, right? And then also giving us that little nudge so that we can poke a wing out when it's getting formed. So I think it first starts with, and actually similar to what Jada said about, like, it first starts with understanding what you need, right? And then also thinking about who do you trust, right? And so I think there's also that step beforehand of like building relationships that are from a place of trust and reciprocity, right? Because sometimes you are also that person for somebody else, right? And you're going to listen to feedback, especially that challenging feedback, from people that you trust and respect. So making sure that you're having a diverse group around you, and thinking about, in both of the Tricia and Jada's, thinking about who's almost, I think about it as like, who's your board team for life, right? Like your board members for life. And who has kind of that sort of treasury department, who has kind of that more like president department, who's, thinking about strategy and things like that, and really kind of curating what that is. But that also, the container is about thinking about what do you need to do for yourself too, that you're not just outsourcing it to everybody else, because you're building that internal leadership and strength to be able to emerge as the butterfly.
That's wonderful. We do have a question also that I'll throw out to, because I think they very clearly asked for anyone. So I'll do this as a toss-up. What well-being practices or rituals help you stay grounded during change, or navigating those challenging times? Are there particular practices or a daily ritual? Is this something that you look at in a long-term strategy of how you inch by inch move towards something through a daily ritual or a regular practice? And so anyone that wants to start.
I mean, I'll jump in quickly and just saying, if something I mentioned in my highlight of my speech is the breath work, and coming back to the body all the time when we're in those challenging, like changing times. We're in our stress cycle. And so if we really want to like move through those with kind of intention and awareness and alignment, we have to remind our nervous system that we're actually safe. And our breath is that tool that everybody has access to. And I always say with my students and my clients that if you don't have access to your breath, then whatever you're like worried about doesn't matter, because you're not alive. And so like you always have access to your breath. And if you, and you don't need money for it, you don't need really a lot of time for it either. You can all just stop and pause, take a big inhale and take a big exhale. And that in itself is going to shift the way you're thinking, feeling from a nervous system perspective.
I don't mind going because I know Trisha's going to have something amazing to say, so I need to go early rather than later. But I am dramatic. I'm just going to be honest. I was a theater kid growing up, and I did speech and debate in high school. I am as dramatic as they come. So for me, processing all of these wild and crazy emotions in some sense, or just big emotions, because all of us have emotions. Just sometimes people are a little bit more dramatic about them. Um, and so I can be dramatic. And so I like to take a step back and write in my journal. I majored in journalism. Writing has always been something that helps me process and reflect. And so I take a step back, I write it all out. First, you got to get all the like, I can't believe this happened to me, blah, 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 out. And then you flip the page and you turn your perspective on it in the same way that you're turning the page. It's a physical turning of the page for me. And so then I give myself ways to work through. What's my strategy moving forward? How am I going to continue pressing forward and not take things so personally? So I do give myself a page to rant, and then I give myself a page to really, really grow. And that's how I move through challenging times.
Yeah, and for me, a lot like Jada, I also am a writer, and I used my journal a lot after I had my injury. And that was really important to label my emotions. But I think, when I talk about the things that really got me through my injury, they are having a purpose, having a passion, and having the people. And so I really relied on my passion of doing sports and trying to figure out how I could get back to doing that after my injury, because it gave me something to look forward to. I could put a race on my calendar. I could put a workout with somebody on my calendar. And I knew that even if I was having a bad day, like there was really this good opportunity to have a good day coming along later that week. And so, that's one thing I ask people all the time, what are you passionate about? And you'd be surprised at how many people don't have a passion, or they don't know what they're passionate about. And I know that if sports had been totally ripped out of my life, I would have been a lot more lost than I was, having the opportunity to still be a wheelchair racer and a athlete across the board in different sports. And so I think it's really important to kind of name those things before something difficult comes into your life.
Thanks for those three answers, because I think also each having it's a unique and different perspective allows anyone in the audience to be able to say, I'm super dramatic as well, and that's a perspective that I would have and how I would deal with it. Or I have an athlete's mind and focus, and I could layer that, sort of focus and mindset, or I believe in the health and mindset aspects of how we live. And so different aspects of each of those answers really fit with just about anybody's perspective. So I love that. Thank you, all three of you, for bringing something powerful to the table today. I'm going to pass it back over to Monica, who will bring us back to port, as she likes to say.
Well, that is our fifth showcase for the summer, and we have one more left before I think the academic year starts for lots of folks. So next Tuesday, we will be here. I think it's the 29th at 2 p.m. for our final showcase of the summer. And we will be joined by Jennifer Barraro, Sarah Lowry, and Noelle Quinones, a new speaker to our roster. So we hope to see all of your faces back here again next week. We will get this recording out to you all this afternoon or tomorrow, so you can share it with your colleagues or folks that you feel like might benefit from it. And thank you again to Stephanie, Jada, and Tricia. We loved having you here this afternoon. So take care, everyone. Have a good afternoon, and we'll see y'all soon.